Hello again. Here I've got another slip joint penknife. This one is the Arthur Wright and Sons spear point. That's what they've called it. Why they've just called it the spear point, I don't know. Not very imaginative, but it'll do, I suppose. Anyway, moving on. This is a good little inexpensive pocket knife. One of these will run you about 18 quid from Heine Haynes, and 18 quid for a handmade pocket knife made in Sheffield, England. Well, I'm not complaining anyway. I mean, the fit and finish isn't exactly perfect, but for 18 quid, you can't go wrong. So let's have a look at this knife, shall we? So as I said, it's a slip joint and a spear point blade, which is actually very similar to the blade on a Swiss Army knife. So we'll get the trusty Spartan here as a comparison. So you'll see that they're kind of similar. I mean, there are some slight differences here, but they are fairly similar. Perhaps similar in length. The Arthur Wright spear point maybe has just a smidge longer blade. I would suggest that this spear point, this Arthur Wright spear point, is probably a bit tougher than a Swiss Army knife. So what do we have here? Well, we have wood scales. I'm not entirely sure what kind of wood that is. I want to say either oak or walnut, but I can't quite tell. Now the scales have been fitted pretty well. As you can see, they're riveted. They meet up quite nicely with the nickel silver bolster there. There's not really any gaps between the scales and the liners, but you can see between the liners and the back spring it's a bit of a mess. Whoops. So the cutler that made this was obviously a lot better at his woodworking than he was his metalworking. Further on the metalworking, if we just get this blade closed, if we look here at the sort of tail end of the back spring, that's not been ground very well. And that seems to be a consistent thing with these Arthur Wright made pocket knives, is they're all, you know, the back spring are all ground pretty badly. Blade centering looks pretty good, I think. But again, you can see there that spring is looking kind of ugly. That kind of ruins it the most. So the cutler that made this has obviously rushed the springs. The bail, you can definitely tell that's been fitted by hand. I mean, that's not even in the slightest. Does it matter? No, not really. It's a functional pocket knife. It works. It was 18 quid and it'll last forever. So can I complain? Maybe not. I don't think it's really worth complaining about. I mean, if I paid 50 quid for this knife, maybe I'd be a bit upset about that. But for £18, made in England, by hand, yeah, it'll do. However, that's not where the complaints end. It is reasonably stiff. It's not too stiff that it's a nail breaker. I mean, I could probably open and close this about 20 times and not have a broken nail, so that's an upside. Like I said, reasonably stiff. Now, speaking of the stiffness, you see that there? That little step up? The blade isn't quite in line with the springs. Now that most certainly does not harm the functionality of the knife, but aesthetically it's kind of annoying. But once again, for £18, I cannot complain too much. We see here the tank stamp, A. Wright and Sons Ltd, Sheffield. Now we do have a bit of a swedge at the tip of the knife here, which isn't sharpened, but it does come down to a finer point. But again, you can see here it's not ground evenly, and they've kind of messed up that tip just a bit. And the grinding isn't too pleasing on the tang either. But really none of that matters because it is very functional and it is very cheap. Well, maybe not cheap, but inexpensive. And this is of the quality that you can, you know, probably use most of your life, so long as you maintain it, you use it correctly, you do not abuse it. You should be able to pass this on to your children and then on to your grandchildren. So that to me is definitely a big thumbs up, even if it isn't the prettiest of knives. That said, if this was your first knife, say you bought this as a first pocket knife because you need to cut fruit, go camping, whatever, you've never had a pocket knife before, you're not going to notice these things. You're not going to notice the slight imperfections. But if you're someone who's been collecting knives for, I don't know, 5 years, you've had, you know, nicer knives, maybe WR case, stuff like that, you're going to know what to look for and you're going to notice these imperfections. Like I said though, for not even 20 quid, not even 20 quid, I think it's acceptable. I think that's reasonable. Would I recommend this knife? Yeah, definitely. I don't see anything wrong with it, other than those, as I said, slight imperfections. It's definitely a usable knife. Although, be prepared to sharpen it, because it does not come very sharp. I want to say out of the box, but it doesn't come in a box. It just came to me in bubble wrap from Heine Haynes. I have to wonder why that is. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for watching.